The phone rang just as the evening shadows stretched across my kitchen wall. I didn't need to check the caller ID. The voice came sharp, clipped, with no warmth at all. "I'll come for the money tonight. Don't you dare go out." It was Serena, my daughter-in-law. She didn't pause, didn't wait for a response, and when the line went dead, I felt the same hollow ache that came with each fifth of the month. My pension wasn't mine anymore. It was her expectation. Her right. As if my life's work had been meant to pad her pockets. I set the phone on the table, my hand trembling against the laminate surface. My little apartment in Asheville was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator. I tried to steady my breathing, but the silence only pressed harder on my chest. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the drawer where I kept old receipts and grocery lists. For some reason, my hand pulled it open. Something rough caught beneath the lining paper. I tugged, and a yellowed corner slipped free. It was an envelope. Edges crumpled. The ink faded, but still legible. My heart stilled. The return address was Maribel's, my daughter. I hadn't seen her handwriting in years. The seal was broken, though I had never opened it. I unfolded the letter with shaking fingers. Inside were words of longing, updates about her new job in Raleigh, and photographs she said she had enclosed, none of which I had ever received. The date at the top was almost 3 years old. I understood then. Serena hadn't just taken my money, she had stolen my daughter's voice, cut me off from the only person who might have stood by me. All those empty holidays, unanswered calls, and the cold silence I thought was Maribel's rejection. It was a lie carefully planted, a wedge driven deeper every year. I pressed the letter to my chest, my eyes stinging. The air felt different now, charged with something more dangerous than fear. For the first time in a long while, I sensed that the story I had believed about my own family was about to unravel. And with that realization, the memories of how everything began came flooding back. Holding Maribel's letter in my hands pulled me back into memories I had tried to bury. I remembered the first time Serena walked into my home. Her arm looped through Adrian's. She was polished, confident, her perfume strong enough to linger in every corner after she left. I had wanted to believe she was good for him. I welcomed her with open arms, setting the table with my best china, cooking the meals Adrian had loved since he was a boy. When they married, I was the one who slipped my savings into their hands. I paid down part of their mortgage so they could breathe easier, helped furnish their living room, even signed a check when Serena announced she wanted to open her boutique. I told myself it was love, that this was what family meant, building each other up, piece by piece. In those days, the house was full. Thanksgiving meant Adrian carving the turkey, Serena arranging the table, and Maribel laughing as she burned the marshmallows on the sweet potatoes. I can still see the candlelight flickering against the windows, hear the chatter spilling from the kitchen. But warmth like that has a way of vanishing when resentment takes root. I began noticing how Serena leaned close to me with whispers. Whenever Maribel wasn't in the room, she's jealous. You know, toxic, really. Always trying to come between Adrian and me. At first, I brushed it off. But repetition is its own poison. Slowly, doubt seeped in. When Maribel called less, when visits grew shorter, I believed Serena's version more than my daughter's silence. That was my mistake. Now, standing in my quiet kitchen, the echoes of those Thanksgivings felt like cruel reminders. The table sat bare, the chairs empty, and I was left with Serena's phone calls that rang like threats instead of invitations. I thought giving would bind us closer, but each sacrifice seemed to carve another piece out of me until nothing remained but expectation. and as I locked the letter away for safekeeping, I felt the weight of every choice pressing down, knowing tomorrow would bring the same cycle of fear when the pension arrived. The 5th of the month always arrives like a storm I can't outrun. That morning, I moved through the apartment with a strange ritual, sliding my pill bottles into the flour canister, tucking my checkbook beneath the cushion of my armchair, twisting each lock on the door until I hear the click 3 times over. It isn't living, it's hiding. My pension was supposed to mean security, medicine, the little comforts that soften old age. Instead, it has become Serena's allowance, her entitlement. By evening, she will come, expecting her cut as if it were written into law. Adrian knows. My son doesn't need to be told what happens each month. I've seen the way he stiffens when the subject of money comes up, the way he averts his eyes as though silence could erase his guilt. He says nothing, does nothing, and his silence speaks more loudly than Serena's threats. Sometimes I press the phone to my ear, thumb hovering over the numbers for the police. My heart races as I imagine saying the words aloud: elder abuse, financial exploitation. But then I think of Adrian, standing in a courtroom beside his wife. I imagine the shame. The headlines in a small town like ours. The family name would be dragged through the mud, and I'd be the one who handed it over. So I sit by the window instead, watching the afternoon slide into evening. My locks are bolted, but they feel like paper against the weight of expectation. The apartment grows darker, shadows stretching across the floor, and I realize I've built myself a prison, brick by brick. With each day of silence, I tell myself it's protection, that keeping peace is worth the price. Yet as the clock ticks toward nightfall, I wonder if it's the silence itself that chains me tighter than any lock. And when the ache begins to press against my chest again, sharper this time, I know the body keeps score of every secret it's forced to carry. That night, as I sat in my chair waiting for Serena's knock, the ache in my chest returned. At first, I told myself it was nerves, that if I breathed slowly, it would pass. But the pressure deepened, like a hand squeezing from the inside, and sweat broke across my forehead. My vision blurred as I reached for my phone. The last thing I remember before the world tilted was dialing 3 numbers. When I opened my eyes again, I was staring at a ceiling washed in fluorescent light. Machines hummed around me, steady and indifferent. The air smelled of antiseptic, sharp and cold. A nurse adjusted something at my side, and I realized I was in Mission Hospital. The next face I saw was a man in a white coat, Dr. Elliot Drummond. He introduced himself. His voice was calm, his presence steady, but his eyes lingered longer than most. He asked questions about my symptoms, my medicines, my history. I answered as best I could, though my mouth felt dry as paper. Then his gaze moved to my arms. He lifted one gently, examining the dark blotches across my skin. "These bruises," he said quietly. "They're recent." I shifted under the sheet. "I bruise easily," I murmured, forcing a weak smile. "At my age, it doesn't take much." He didn't look away. He made a note on his chart. But the weight of his silence pressed against me harder than any accusation. Finally, he spoke, his tone even but unyielding. "Mrs. Rowan, I want you to know this when we see signs like this. Protocol requires us to involve social services. They'll reach out not to punish, but to protect." The word echoed inside me, protect. No one had spoken to me like that in years. For the first time, the fear I carried felt visible, undeniable, and as the nurse returned to check my vitals, I realized I was no longer entirely alone in this. That night, after the monitors settled into their steady rhythm, they wheeled another bed into my room, The curtain between us swayed as nurses adjusted equipment and murmured instructions. When the rustle quieted, a gentle voice drifted through. "Evening. My name's Eudora." The curtain was pulled back just enough for me to see her silver hair pinned in a bun. Large glasses sliding down her nose. A stack of books on her bedside table as if she couldn't be without them. She was 76. "A retired literature professor," she said. "Here for gallbladder surgery." We spoke little at first. There was comfort in the quiet. Two women lying side by side with machines humming like background music. Then, sometime after midnight, her voice came again. Softer this time. "My son pushed me once because I told him no about money." The words hung in the sterile air, and I felt my breath catch. She turned her head toward me, her eyes steady, but tired. "Just once," she added, "but it was enough. Enough to know what he valued most." I swallowed hard. My own truth pressed against my lips until I let it slip into the dark. "Mine doesn't raise a hand," I whispered. "But he suffocates me with demands. Every month. As if what I earned doesn't belong to me at all." Eudora didn't gasp. Didn't pity. She only nodded, as though she had known the shape of my suffering long before I gave it words. For the first time, I didn't feel crazy. I didn't feel like a weak old woman imagining threats and shadows. I felt seen. The silence we shared after that wasn't empty. It was full of recognition, of solidarity, of a quiet strength passing between two strangers. And when morning came, I found myself reaching for the phone with a different thought in mind. Morning light spilled through the blinds, casting thin stripes across the hospital floor. Eudora was still asleep, her breathing steady. When I picked up my phone, my hands shook so badly I almost dropped it. 3 years since I last heard Maribel's voice. 3 years of silence I believed was hers. The first ring nearly made me hang up. By the third, my chest tightened with dread. Then, "Hello?" A voice both familiar and foreign cracked through the line. "Maribel," I whispered, my throat catching. "It's Mom." There was a pause, the kind that stretches a lifetime, then a rush of breath, almost a sob. "Where are you?" An hour later, she was in my room, standing in the doorway as if afraid I might vanish if she stepped closer. Her hair was darker now, streaked with silver, her eyes shadowed from years I hadn't been there to witness. She came to my bedside, gripping my hand as though anchoring us both. The words poured out quickly, letters she wrote that never reached me, photos she mailed that disappeared, visits where Serena turned her away at the door. Each revelation cut deeper. And then the sharpest wound of all. "There's someone I want you to meet," she said softly. She pulled out her phone, swiping to a picture of a little girl with wide hazel eyes and a shy smile. "Her name is Viola. She's 6. 6 years. 6 birthdays missed. 6 summers never shared. 6 winters without a stocking from me by the fireplace. My granddaughter. A whole life I had been robbed of." Tears burned hot as I traced the screen with my fingertip, memorizing every line of her face. "I thought you didn't want us," Maribel whispered. "Serena said you'd changed, that you were sick, that it was better if we stayed away." I closed my eyes, feeling both fury and grief surge together. Betrayal had stolen my daughter, and with her, the first precious years of my granddaughter's life. And as Maribel's grip tightened, I knew Serena's next visit would not unfold the way she expected. When I was finally released from the hospital, the apartment felt different, not bigger or brighter, but alive again. Maribel had come that first weekend with Viola, who carried a small stuffed rabbit and a shy smile. The rooms that had once echoed with nothing but the tick of the clock now pulsed with the sound of laughter, of crayons scratching across paper, of my granddaughter humming as she played on the rug. We made dinner together, simple soup and cornbread, and for the first time in years, the table held more than a single plate. I sat across from Maribel, watching her ladle soup into bowls while Viola arranged napkins with the seriousness only a child can bring. My heart ached at the years we had lost, but it also swelled at the sight before me. The knock came just after sunset, sharp, impatient. Before I could rise, the door burst open. Serena strode in, her heels clicking against the linoleum, her mouth already twisted into a sneer. "You didn't answer my calls," she snapped. "I told you I'd be here for the money." But then she stopped. Her eyes landed on Maribel, standing tall beside me, and then on Viola, who peeked from behind the table leg with wide, unblinking eyes. Serena's confidence faltered, just for a breath, before her voice hardened again. "This doesn't change anything," she spat. "Where's my share?" Maribel stepped forward, her phone already in her hand, her voice calm but edged with steel. "You won't touch her again. Serena. Say one more word, and this call goes straight to the police." For the first time, I saw Serena hesitate, her eyes darting between us as though the balance of power had shifted under her feet. The silence in the room was thick, broken only by Viola's quiet grip on my sleeve. I straightened in my chair, no longer the prey waiting in fear. The table that had once been a place of emptiness now stood as a witness, holding the proof that I was not alone anymore. And in that fragile stillness, I prepared for what Serena might try next. Serena's eyes narrowed that night, her voice rising in threats that rattled against the walls. But I didn't flinch. I had carried a secret too long, and now was the moment to place it on the table. "You think you own me," I said quietly, my fingers steady as I slid a folder from the drawer by my chair. "But you don't. Not then. Not now. Not ever." She scoffed, but the sound faltered when she saw the embossed letterhead of a law firm. I opened the folder slowly, letting the pages speak louder than my voice ever had. "This," I said, tapping the deed, "is to my husband's cabin in the Blue Ridge Mountains. You told everyone I signed it over, but I never did. It is mine, and only mine." Her face drained of color. She reached out, but Maribel's hand came down hard on the folder, blocking her. "And these," I continued, lifting another set of papers, "are the legal documents I prepared last year. I wanted protection before I had the courage to say no. They ensure no one, no matter how close, can touch my assets without my consent. Not you, not even Adrian." The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Serena's mask cracked. For the first time, I saw panic flicker across her features. I leaned back, a calmness filling me like fresh air after a storm. "You built your power on the belief that I was too weak to fight, but you never considered what I might be saving for the right moment." Maribel stood straighter at my side, and even little Viola seemed to sense the shift, her small hand tightening around mine. Serena's words dried up. For years, she had treated me as a resource to drain. Tonight, she learned that silence does not mean surrender, and I knew the reckoning was still to come. I had thought Serena would retreat after seeing the papers, but greed doesn't retreat. It lunges. Weeks later, a call from the bank confirmed what I already feared. Someone had attempted to cash forged checks in my name. The handwriting was a poor imitation, but the intent was clear. By the time the case reached Buncombe County Courthouse, I was no longer trembling behind locked doors. I sat upright in the witness stand, the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead, the polished wood cool beneath my palms. The prosecutor laid out the evidence piece by piece: bank records, handwriting analysis, testimony from a teller who remembered Serena's impatience as she pushed the papers forward. Adrian sat behind her, his face pale, his silence louder than any confession. He had known, all along. He had known when it was my turn to speak. I rose slowly. The courtroom quieted. Every eye on me. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "You thought my silence meant weakness," I said, my words steady, carried on years of buried strength. It was the pause before the storm. Serena's eyes darted, searching for a foothold, but there was none left. Her mask of control had shattered. The gavel struck, and the verdict was read guilty of fraud. The sentence would follow. But in that moment, the punishment was already written across her face. I didn't cheer. I didn't cry. Justice isn't loud, it is final, sharp as a closing door. As I stepped out into the crisp air of Asheville, the courthouse steps beneath my feet, Maribel slipped her arm through mine. Viola skipped ahead, her laughter rising into the autumn sky. For the first time in years, I felt the ground firm beneath me. And as we walked toward home, I knew the next chapter of my life would not be written in fear, but in peace. 2 years have passed, and the days no longer arrive like storms. I wake with the sun spilling across my windowsill, where pots of roses bloom in shades of crimson and pale pink. Their fragrance drifts through the apartment, filling the spaces once thick with dread. I am 70 now, my body slower, but my spirit steadier. Each week, Maribel and little Viola visit. They come with laughter, with drawings for the refrigerator, with stories of school projects and new recipes to try. The silence that once weighed heavy over these rooms has been replaced by voices, by life. On Saturdays, Maribel brings groceries, insisting on carrying the bags while I scold her half-heartedly. Viola skips ahead, rushing to the window to see if the roses have grown. "This one's taller than me now," she declares, her hands stretched high. And I laugh, truly laugh, the sound startling even to my own ears. Sometimes I catch myself staring at the table where Serena once stood, her demands sharp as knives. That same table now holds Viola's crayons, Maribel's teacups, and the half-finished puzzles we work on together. The ghosts have been replaced by the living, and I let them go without regret. One afternoon, as the kettle hissed softly, I leaned close to the roses and whispered what had become my truth. Love may open doors, but only respect keeps them open. Viola heard me and tilted her head, her small fingers plucking one bloom carefully. She carried it to the table and set it down in the center, right where the fear used to sit. "For you, Grandma," she said with a shy smile. I touched the petals, soft and cool, and felt peace spread through me. At last, the table no longer belonged to betrayal. It belonged to us. If betrayal sat at your table, would you forgive or finally breathe free